Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel, and in today's episode, I welcome Rob, Asher, and James Blackwood. Rob and James are co-founders of Giraffe, an incredibly powerful web-based 3D platform that combines design, mapping, and financial tools to reimagine integrated design and development. In this episode, we explore the topics of rethinking data, process, and innovation, and discuss the challenges of redundant work, the myth of spontaneous innovation inside firms, the value of knowledge retention, and how purpose-built tools like Giraffe are transforming how architects access information during the design process. Rob and James share their personal journeys, Rob coming from architecture and James bringing his data and analytics expertise to becoming tech founders, offering insights into software design, user behavior, and what it really takes to build a more sustainable and creative architecture practice. A key theme from this conversation, which connects to many other Troxel podcast episodes, is the need for technology that integrates design across commercial, technological, governance, and cultural dimensions. Too often, our tools force separation between these aspects, making it nearly impossible to design in a way that reflects real-world complexity that not only influences and constrains the design of a project, but also exists beyond the property lines of a site. Rob and James are working to change that, and their vision is one that could reshape how we think about integrated design and delivery at scale, because Giraffe is not just another design app, it's a tool that builds tools. And as you'll hear in the conversation today, it's a pretty clever and simple way to implement and scale distributed computational design. And the timing couldn't be better because they've just launched a new core product for single users of the Giraffe platform, which makes it incredibly accessible at $45 a month. As usual, there's an extensive amount of additional information in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. You can find them directly in your podcast app if you're a paid supporter of Troxel Plus. And if you're a free member, you can find them on the website, which is again, trxl.co. Lastly, you can really help the podcast by sharing the episodes with your colleagues and by commenting and sharing my LinkedIn posts. You can also leave a comment over on YouTube and engage with me and the other listeners there. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts about this episode. So now, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Rob Asher and James Blackwood. I'm very excited to have Team Giraffe here on the podcast today. I'm joined by Rob and James. Welcome to the show, Rob. Great to have you back, and I'm glad to talk to you on the podcast officially, James. This is going to be fun.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Evan.
Rob, tell us your story to kind of set the stage here, because this is, I think it's emblematic of a lot of people in the industry. And a lot, I don't know how to put a number to that, but at least people who listen to this podcast, I think, are very much going to be able to see a commonality, a common thread in their lives to what you've gone through. But I would love it if you could give everybody that story so that gives us kind of the jumping off point for this conversation.
Yeah. So I started as an architect at a tier one, sort of a classic big office in Sydney, which was called FJMT at the time, which was a design-driven office. I think the year after I got there, they won the World Architectural Forum Building of the Year for this museum in Auckland. And I think last year they won it again for a school. So design excellence. And in Australia, we do a lot of design competition. There's a sort of, you get an FAR bonus if you go to competition. And so you do these three-way, like head-to-head competitions, very short, intense, sort of 6 to 12 week design competitions, which, you know, no sleeping, classic architecture, which I really enjoyed. Exactly. Yeah. So big ego, design excellence, highly intense, going for the big prize. Normally in core markets are doing towers or museums or something very, right in the city center. That was, you know, a lot of eyes on it, a lot of, you know, the city and the officials and the client and everyone had really high expectations. And basically the reason I got into the design sort of excellence competition side was because of Grasshopper. So I did a maths degree as well as my architecture degree. And so very shortly after starting.
Wait. What?
Yes. I didn't know what to do at leaving school. So I did maths. So pure maths, which has actually turned out to be amazing because
I bet.
that
And at the
way
same
of
time, like, okay, so everybody who was in high school, or I don't know if this is still the case, but every counselor always said, "Oh yeah, you got to have a lot of math if you want to go into architecture."
yeah,
And
yeah,
what
yeah,
they meant was engineering. They had no idea that they were
yeah.
actually talking to some. They didn't know what an architecture degree was. They just made these kind of
Yeah, they like
basic
it's left
assumptions.
brain or whatever it is. Yeah, yeah.
So did you take their advice, or you were just good at it, or this was just something like you said, you just didn't know what you wanted to be, kind of a thing. You didn't know.
And my family is very mathematical, so it's kind of like I had to, you know what I mean? So my dad and my
You
two
had to.
brothers,
Okay,
I
it was
sort of
expectations.
not yeah, as in yeah. I was like always the English guy, like the artsy guy,
Okay.
but no. So I did the maths, and I did a very high level of maths, which so you start off maths very concrete, like like vectors and things you can actually visualize, and very quickly, like by year 2 and year 3, you're talking about spaces and operations, and it's so abstracted you don't. And I was not good at that. Like I actually really liked the concrete space, like the dimensional stuff. So I wasn't particularly. I could get through, but just. But that process and that way of thinking about how do you abstract a problem, how do you make it as simple and as general as possible, is essentially like you can see that in Giraffe. Like that's basically what we're doing, and it's like it's almost the opposite of where software normally goes. Like if we think of people talking about digital twin, it's always funny to me. It's just that this is an aside, but the mesh models are more complicated. There's more polygons. There's more features. There's more. And like, what are you describing? Whereas in mathematics or physics, like a whole branch of physics will collapse down into like E equals mc squared, and there's 4 other equations. And once you got that, you've got it all. Like we've made it simpler and more abstract, and so it's more useful. Whereas
more accessible, maybe,
it's more
like,
exactly
as far as the concepts and the foundations go. Sure.
And so the better you know something, the simpler it should be, the more lightweight. Whereas so often in software, like version 20 of the software as opposed to version 1 is like more cumbersome, more features, more bolt-ons. Do you know what I mean? It's like the other way. So trying to really get to simplicity is basically what maths is. It's simplicity, the other side of complexity. You can't sort of, you know what I mean? It's not like you can ignore the complexity, but when you really get your head across it, you can find simplicity. So I did the maths, and I sort of got into the profession probably about 2011, and it was a Mac. Yeah, there was generative components at the time, which I think was coming out of the Foster's computational design group, or at least Allied. And so I spent one summer holidays learning that. I absolutely clicked on that. I think that was on MicroStation. It was very old school looking. Got back and had to battle with IT. Got Grasshopper, and then basically, it just my mind exploded. Loved it, and basically combined then Grasshopper on design excellence teams, like as in Grasshopper for design. So not doing sort of engineering interop stuff. That sort of came later, as in beams and parabolas and these complex geometries, but more using it, sometimes doing that if it was going to help us win the competition, but sometimes just doing area schedules or much more Giraffe looking stuff, very simple stuff.
And so I'm just curious to drag this out a little bit more. Like, what was your experience moving into the profession? I mean, it sounds like you were able to pursue kind of that trajectory is it because you were doing competition-based projects, or is it really like? And then I'm just curious, like, where did that lead you to in the profession, and kind of your overall feeling about it?
So I would say I have design ability, but really the reason I was on those teams was because I could do the complex geometry. So if the design director was like, we need the roof to just do that, then I could make it do that. Do you know what I mean?
Nice. And
then he, and especially, with the sliders in Grasshopper where you're changing a parameter and then seeing a change in real time. It's a very, it's like a drug for a design director because they can see the thing working.
Because they're sitting there and they're like, a little bit, a little bit that, it's like there's that gif out there where it's like the guy's sitting over the shoulder and he's moving the toilet, a few inches at a time. But
exactly.
Yeah, it is a drug for those.
But what was really good is the design director I was working for, as he was doing I learned a lot around what the actual job is, because he would sit over my shoulder and he would be practicing the story that he would have for the jury, the design jury. And he'd be like, okay, so what we'll say to the cost guy is this. And if he says this, we'll say this. And then what we're going to say to the city is that. And okay, can you move it like that? So then if he asks about that view, then and he was building an argument with
a narrative. Yeah.
And he was building a narrative
for,
and he was
different audiences.
Yeah, exactly. And not only one, but he had like levels of response, as in he'd war gamed out every, little eddy that he could get trapped in. And just knowing, again, coming back to the simplicity, he wasn't going to tell that whole story like from notes, but he had the whole story there. He was just going to show the pictures. And if he got blocked, and seeing how profoundly important narrative and concept is to the actual business of architecture was very, very cool. So I was working on my computer, coding away, and then getting the narrative over the top of my head. And that was a great, intro.
I'm just curious, because before we move on to James here, like that experience for you, I'm curious how that worked its way back into like the tooling, because like flexibility in those early stages are so important, right? And it's like you don't want to have to remodel stuff all the time, right? All of those things independently from scratch, or the painstaking process of, because if you're just brute force modeling, right? Like you've got to remodel, or you're most likely to break something if you have to modify it. And so kind of going back to this idea of describing intent and image making and storytelling and narrative, and that actually being possible through the tools is, I mean, that's
the
to
thing.
Me is,
and that's why like the sketch pad, I like to talk about this integration. So I often in my, if you go to a very good doctor or any good professional, they are more calm, right? They don't come in and they're like, okay, we're going to do this test and this test and this test and blah, 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 and we'll CAT scan and we'll 3D scan, whatever. They're like, okay, right, this is what's going to happen. We're going to do this test and we're going to get the results. Then we're going to do
happens.
You know what I mean? And they slow it down for you, and they see the whole journey, and they may, have their worries, but they don't like hit you with this complexity.
Exactly.
And they stagger it out, right? And
because that avalanche would be crippling, right? And
it would totally be crippling. Yeah. And the number of times early stage where, like when I was a younger architect and you're drawing and suddenly you're trying to get a core right, like get it efficient or something like that, or your fire escape's not working. And then the director comes in and he's like, oh yeah, we're not building a residential tower anymore. It's an aquarium. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's because it's not sequenced properly and you haven't fully understood how fluid that early stage of design is. And so you've really got to match where you are. So just take it easy. If it's about half a meter out or half a foot there, don't worry. We don't even know if there's a scheme yet. You know what I mean? Like, let's just relax.
This is why you'll see architects sketching on trace with really fat pens in the beginning, right? Because it's like, how thick is that? Who cares, right?
Don't think about that. If you think about that, you're not thinking about the right thing, which will actually cost you. So I think that the trace technology, like an internal challenge for us is, when does our software become better than trace? Because trace is still the premium technology for that early stage, I think. Do you know what I mean? It's so good. Yeah. It's intimate.
Fast, loose.
People sit around it. It's fast. You can give the pen to someone and say, well, show me. So in terms of building consensus, building that narrative, getting the principles, it's an unbelievable technology, which is why senior design directors use it to run their businesses. And you've got to respect it.
It's a superpower. It's a superpower. And
absolutely.
I mean, there's so many, and I think sketching nowadays could mean a lot of things. If you surveyed 100 different architects, from students to seasoned architects, you would get a lot of different answers. For some people, sketching is Grasshopper. For some people, sketching is CAD. For some people, sketching is 3D modeling. And there's a lot of different versions. For some people, it's AI now, right? Like it's But like that really simple, fundamental writing implement on a piece of paper,
exactly,
and like that is captivating for people to actually sit on the other side of the table and watch
100%.
It happen and unfold. And you're right, you can hand that writing implement over to somebody, and they know how to use it. Right.
Totally.
And they'll say, oh no, I don't know how to sketch. I can't draw. It's like, I don't care. Like,
Do something.
This
That's
is
right.
the steering wheel, drive for a minute,
Yeah.
and just communicate. That's really what we're asking for in those. It's really cool.
We're asking exactly, and what it does is it reveals a mind that understands. Like if the person takes the page and he says, "All right, the most important thing is this," and he starts diagramming, and then we're going to do that, and it just reveals a mind with expertise. It's very hard to hide. You know what I mean? It shows.
Yeah.
So Giraffe trying to be that is like our gold star. And the one thing the sketch doesn't do is doesn't do the numbers. It doesn't calculate. And I think computers,
there's no scale inherently, right? Unless you have a ton of experience, and it's like, what scale is that? It's like, I don't know, seventh scale. I don't. Not even a real number.
Exactly. So, but the guys with a ton of, like, the directors that have that experience, they know. It's very interesting. It's very interesting when you watch someone very good, and you'll sketch, and they'll be like, "What scale are you working at? Like, isn't the scale in your blood yet? Like, what are you doing?" So it's funny what you can learn. But it doesn't do the numbers. And so where I got to is I was building these clusters in Grasshopper. I would say probably what distinguished me from most of the people around me, like computationally designed, was I would just cluster and I would iterate on my clusters. Or like kind of like an Andrew Hume, where you like write your own code and you have version
in order to make reusable tools. Is that
correct?
Really
exactly, reusable tools, because it's very boring. It's not as fun, but man, it's sort of, and it's slow initially, but man, it gets fast. So I would have like FISO 11, and I had this tool with all the funny things about being an architect. Like, I could pull the area out, but honestly, in 30% of meetings, people would say, "I don't want to know the actual area. I actually just want you to say that this is 800 square feet." Like, so I had this deemed area parameter, which is like, you tell me what the area is and I'll put it in, and it's not the area, but But that's so critical, because they're like, we'll get the area right later. But if we change the shape of the building to a true area now, what's going to happen is
people will focus on that.
Exactly. And so it's this whole thing around actually sequencing the information. So anyways, I had those, and the way it ended up was I would sit with the design director in a meeting with a client, and the design director would sketch and I would sketch digitally, model next to it. And I was about maybe 30 seconds slower. And then the numbers would come out. And after about 20 minutes of that, we'd have a workable 3D model. And then everyone would start looking at the 3D model, because then we would be like trying to get the areas right, so they would go concept to model to refinement. And I was like the offsider and of the design director. And it was an incredible way of running meetings. And the client buy-in was, because then the client would say, "Oh, just move that," and you do it. And they see the areas change and they go, "Ooh, okay, it's not the ROI I need," or whatever it is. But then by the end, you've done 20 or 30 iterations, and you're not doing this thing of going back to the office and optioneering and then coming back with options. So there we saw, or I learned, just the power of the digital sketch, or the 3D model that can actually tell you stuff, is also an incredibly valuable substance. And I guess that was probably the first time we got some of the essence of the sketchpad into the computer, where it's literally you have to use it in front of the client.
But
and
you
we still
had to be a super user to do that, right? Like in real time, 30 seconds behind the design director, like you had all these clusters already developed.
If I was gone, it was dead. It was finished. That's right. And there was so much processing there in Rhino in terms of like cleaning up the lines and making sure that, like, degenerate geometry, like there was just all this stuff to make sure it was quick. And it wasn't even, if you didn't know Rhino, if you weren't very facile with Rhino, it wasn't that quick. And it was trapped within me, as in I would try and get people to use my clusters, and they just, like, my clusters had like 25 inputs, and 4 outputs. And they were just like, right. Nah.
Yeah.
So what it meant was I could become, my career sort of did two things. I was like by then an associate, so client facing, so I could start run my own projects, little ones. So rather than going the tech route, I went the client facing route. So use the tech, but design first. And then the other thing I did is started moving with Lucy, who's one of our other founders, into urban planning, strategic planning. So sort of one step bigger, master planning. And that's when you're doing infrastructure and rezonings, and you're thinking about the city in a much more holistic way. And there you're abstracted over the building. You're like, don't even worry about what the building is. Like, we're just doing like a blob, right? And that'll be a school. Which was really fun. And
beyond the property line of like a project, it's like
correct.
all
It's
of
like
the
multi. It's
other
like, what if we
things.
do this one and this one? And they're the questions are like, well, what if we bought both properties, or what if we put a road through the middle of them, or what if this train station went there? So it's much more. It's like, it's more SimCity-ish in a way. I mean, you've got these political overlays. Is not. There's huge constraints and challenges, but it's amazing to do, and I recommend architects do it just because the code which they're operating within is distilled out of this design, urban process, and then it falls down into code, and then that falls down into the buildings that they're designing. And I think seeing that full stack is very helpful.
Rob, do you think we've made James wait long enough?
I think so, yeah.
I think
can
so.
see him
Okay.
just absolutely desperate.
He's antsy. He's antsy. He's over here just.
Oh, I'm loving
chomp.
it. I love listening to Rob talk. It reminds me of when I first got intro to Giraffe. Rob and I actually know each other from when I was working at Tableau and Salesforce, and I was doing these large enterprise data transformations with big Australian clients, which to me with massive companies, but on a global scale, aren't that big. But we all lived in this house together, and Rob's brother John, who is part of Giraffe, we were all living together. And I remember a lot of those conversations had this element to them where the conversation's fascinating. And I love listening to Rob think because he has this first principles brain, and everything is an interesting observation to Rob. So people are fascinating to Rob. And I, as a friend of Rob, you're like, oh, it's very stimulating. So it's like a nice culture to be a part of. And I remember when Rob first showed me Giraffe, it was that thing you were describing earlier of looking at a master plan and talking through it live. And Rob was just doing a little demo of drawing on a map. I mean, so simple, and drawing like lines of corridors that you want to preserve or view access that you want to preserve, and then drawing and seeing the data update. And my brain went like, holy moly, I understand this completely. Because what I was doing at Tableau was that for massive organizations, but with these huge data sets that they had no idea how to get any value out of. And they need a visual, concrete way to tell the story about what's in that data. And when they have that within their organization, it's crazy what it does for culture. It totally transforms their culture and explaining to themselves what's already happening in the business. There is like an intuition that good business people have about what's happening, but their ability to tell the story with good facts is totally limited by their ability to process huge amounts of data. Yeah. And when you give them a tool that's easy to use, that's visual, it lights people up. And so when I saw Rob do that with Giraffe, I was like, I get it. I mean, you need to give me a job, basically. And that was the genesis of this. And I'm the last founder, I guess, or the first employee, however you want to describe it, the last one in, so to speak. But man, I got so excited about it. I remember my first kind of conversations with clients were totally overwhelming because I didn't really know the sector very well. I know data, and I know the power of being able to tell a good story, but learning the sector was a real challenge for me. And that's a whole story in of itself. But I've become a huge fan of architecture, and even as a kid, I wanted to be an architect, and a civil engineer is what I started studying at university. But data is really the unlock for me, and I love watching what data does for our clients. And seeing Giraffe as a data tool is really, I think, the essence of what it actually is. It's a giant database. So that's how we got started, and I guess it's been 5 years.
I would love to hear just you explain, because maybe there's people out there who don't know what Tableau and Salesforce are, from like a nuts and bolts kind of like. Everybody knows Power BI most likely because there's a lot of Microsoft shops out there. I'll just call it that, right?
Evan, but how could you?
I know.
Power BI.
I just talk about what that is so that people understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so Tableau. Oh gosh, take me back. I need to remember my elevator.
You still
pictures,
got it. You've got it, James.
Okay, so before Tableau, I was building Excel models as a consultant for anyone who needed one. And my last job was looking at a commission statement for a financial advisor, and I'd build these massive pivot tables, which would then say, if the legislation changes with X, what's that going to do to our trailing revenue stream? And that Excel model took me probably 2 weeks of solid thinking to build. And what the outcome of that was a messy table that would break every time, we needed to put a new data dump into it. But it
Sounds
was
like
functional.
a Grasshopper script.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Or like any master plan area schedule where you have that much data coming out of the model, and then you have to and then as soon as you have to do any different kind of question, you're like, oh crap, I have to re-engineer this whole thing from the get-go, any different question you add. So what Tableau was, and Tableau's pre-Power BI, and there's a whole thing we can talk about there that, Power BI gives me the sweats late at night. Yeah, that's right. Tableau was first. And basically what it is, it's a piece of technology that looks at a data set, breaks it down into its smallest components, and then allows you to reassemble it as a graph first, as a visual. They invented a language called VisQL. It's basically just SQL that turns drag and drop functionality into a graph that can help you explain the data set. So finding trends becomes a visual exercise as opposed to a coding exercise,
which is incredible, right? For people who are, people are amazing at pattern recognition, and to be able to assign sizes and shapes and colors and have things triggered by different variables, conditional kind of formatting stuff, but very visually, not just changing the color of a cell, right?
Yes,
in Excel.
exactly.
But man, it's like I imagine like when when Rob showed you Giraffe, like you probably had a similar moment when you went from like Excel to Tableau.
I did, yeah. And actually that was my sort of other software aha moment where I was like, I need to work for a software company because this is unbelievable. What's happening here is game changing. And yeah, it's exactly right. I plugged in the Tableau because it's a desktop tool, super old school, to the data set that I'd done with that financial advisor on their commission plan. And I was like, oh man, I could have answered that question in an hour. And then I could have answered 100 other questions that the guy even didn't ask me that would have been massively, value add to his business. And so I thought, I don't want to do spreadsheets anymore. I want to go work for that company. And so like I did for Rob, I called them and was like, I want to come work for you. And I chased them down for a job, which they eventually gave me. So that was and I loved that job. I loved that company. And I saw the same thing with Giraffe and what Rob's done and the guys have done.
Well, Rob, maybe now we can shift into your shift out of the profession and your experiences that you got up to that point to becoming a software developer, basically, right? Like you turned into a startup. I mean, that story, again, kind of a common thread, probably, or at least a thought, maybe a fleeting thought for many audience listeners who are hearing your story, like they, going into architecture. Wow, architecture isn't quite what we all thought it was going to be when we were in school, right? Like there wasn't. So anyway, I want you to tell us that bit of the story.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Architecture it's a hard profession, and it's a profession that I think it's not lost in the modern world, but it's changing so quickly in terms of the fees that go to the contractors and it's just a very it's very hard. I think it's one of the most important professions in the world, as in because we're living on an urban planet and we're urbanizing the planet. It's like we're terraforming Earth, and architects are basically doing that. And if we do that badly, like that's Earth badly terraformed. And if we do it well, that's incredible. So, and architects hold, I think, an absolutely critical function of like, how do you make design? How do you make this human-centered? How do you do this well? But the profession is so overwhelmed with like just doing area schedules and blah, 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 and so it's and so I sort of looked at it as a systems problem and was going, I could do say 10 great buildings or precincts or something, or I could set up a firm. I'm not, as I'm very, I don't know, after my maths degree, I'm more comfortable with the computer than with like client-facing work. So you go, okay, my strengths are, I see this systemic issue, this problem, and I want to make city making better. And I think the tooling is one area where we can contribute. And, it's not like we're going to change the entire thing. It's not like Giraffe will solve the problems, but this is where we can work really hard and really well and do something really good. And I knew that was, I could feel that. And I had this I was speaking to clients. I was using my Rhino version of Giraffe to do gigs and deliver them in ways that were just blowing people's minds. And so I had this strong feedback that what we were doing was new, and people were loving it. And so I thought, okay, let's do it. And we went through a startup accelerator, which was really good because it gives you this whole kind of, it's just a different paradigm, like this kind of VC, hype machine paradigm, which we didn't fully buy into, but was very helpful and very useful. We've never taken VC because I think property's too slow for VC fundamentally. Like, you can go to like a property company and someone who's made their career on 2 deals. I mean, it's taken them 10 years to do that.
Yeah.
And then, whereas VC, like it's much quicker. So, but it was really useful seeing that ambition and that kind of, that whole sector is like, they're ready to like smash things and just do stuff. And then, and started the business. So that was happening. But the fundamental thesis was that the tooling is broken, right? Is that the architectural stack is broken. And we need to build something that is better. And it's very hard to explain because at the same time I'm talking to James and I'm getting this kind of top-down enterprise view of what data is and how decision-making works within corporates. And what's a corporate? Just a large body of people, right? And then I've got my bottom-up, like art, black t-shirt, architecture, sketch pad kind of artist's view of the world. And it's all kind of stewing. And we're making a product that is very, very disparate, as in it's a database, it's on the map, it's a sketch tool, it's an areas tool. We're trying to basically put in Grasshopper in there as well so that people can code on top of it. And so technically it's very challenging. And so we sort of hit the market with this kind of hot mess, as in it's cool, but what is it? Not sure. And I mean, and it's really cool. It's really, like, you can tell because, like, even the word I'd use now is integrated. It integrates so many factors. As in, if you don't, there's that Saarinen quote, like, design a door handle in a room, in a building, in a city, like, just expand your scales. And then people open Rhino and it's just a gray box. And then they're like going to Google Maps and like screenshotting and then like scaling in a satellite image, or even the newer tools or like SketchUp, you click and it cuts like a square out. Whereas we were like, let's just put it on the map. Let's just get everything in. Let's turn it inside out. So you're always on planet Earth. And wouldn't it be cool if you could see all of your projects all of the time? Because, even like in the design firms I work, it's like the projects are just in the P drive or whatever it is.
Right.
Like you know what I mean? And people would be like, oh, didn't we do a project in Parramatta 2 years ago where someone actually got this survey? Like, where's that? Was it 219443?
Exactly.
Like, I don't know. That data's gone. It's finished. Whereas we were like, all the projects in Giraffe are on the map. So you're like, where's that Parramatta project? You just go to Parramatta and you see that project. There it is. And you grab the stuff and come back. So we were like reconceptualizing at a very fundamental level how you interact with the database, because it's just a database at the end of the day. It's just polygons. It doesn't matter if you're Rev, it doesn't matter who you are. It's just polygons on a database. You've got to come up with a special name for it, BIM 2.0, whatever it is, but it's just that, Right. And so I don't know, there was all this potential. And basically what happened then was we thought, okay, let's take this to the architects. And the architects were like, we've got so much software, we're not getting any more. But we had this insight mainly coming from James around, well, the corporate problem of actually pulling this information apart in an AEC space when you're talking about property is unsolved. Like, because Power BI and Tableau, there's massive amounts of capital invested in software that helps corporates pull their data apart, but not in AEC. And the opportunity is that all the BIM vendors like Autodesk and Nemetschek are on the technical side of the fence. And so they're going more and more deeper and further away from the corporate as, the tools are more complex and heavier. Whereas there's some person, and I tell you right now, somewhere on planet Earth, someone is doing $1 billion deal and they're doing it on, if you're lucky, Bluebeam and a hand calculator. Do you know what I mean? They're going, I can fit a rectangle this big on this site. I haven't spoken to an architect and I'm going to option that site up right now. So they're so thin and there's no tools to support them. And we realized that, what we'd had built over here in Technoland you could sort of sling out into enterprise.
It's shocking,
land.
actually.
It is shocking.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
I was, we in that first year, we probably did, I don't know, hundreds of conversations with people, architects, engineers, developers, government people. I could not believe how underserved that corporate side of defense was in terms of technology. And it's amazing. There's not much they need to do great deals. They've been doing great deals for a while, but there's still so much risk at that top end of the funnel and very little digital tools to do it. And at Bluebeam, I listened to your Bluebeam episode because I was so fascinated by that tool, is for sure used. And so there's this kind of stigma of, I don't want to draw. But then if you actually double click on what they're doing, they're all drawing something at some point, somewhere.
Yes.
Because if they have to think about it spatially, because it's a spatial problem, first and foremost, where am I going to put 70 by, 150 box? And it needs to fit here or here or here or here or whatever. And so it actually is like the same problem to a different audience and early. So when we struggle to penetration with architects who've got great tools, and there's a lot of Robs out there who think like Rob and are building their own tools, because we were a bootstrap company and we were trying to make ends meet, we went to where the opportunity was. And that was our first kind of big traction of funding the business via actually making sales for the first couple of years.
And that's just zoomed up. I think it's like zoomed out and almost reinforced our systemic understanding of the problem. Like if you look, the problem is terraforming the planet or we say city making. It's such an abstract problem. We don't know how to tell it to the market. It's not design, because design is actually one step on like a 10-step process. And you've got to think about the policy and the financial and the and only when you get a full integration of all of those considerations are you going to get a good outcome, are you going to get a human place. Because if anything falls over, the designer could be excellent, but the code doesn't allow X, it's not going to happen. And so I love watching these guys trying to get point-loaded stairs allowed in state of Seattle or in America where you have the double stair. And that bit of code has been the most profound designer of multifamily in America. And to change that code, you have to hop out of the design bucket and you have to go up the policy bucket.
Right.
And you have to do that like 20 times. You can't just be like, hey, I'm a designer, I wait for a brief. And when the brief comes, I do great design. And then my design is built. Because it's just disintegrated thinking, as in if you want it to actually do really well, you need to somehow bring all of it together. And the fragmentation, so we're crossing this boundary. Like you imagine Giraffe, we came as architects and now we're selling to corporates, and we're slowly starting to sort of build this bridge conceptually between these two kind of islands. And we're finding actually it's like a whole series of islands and everyone's very fragmented. And the opportunity suddenly emerges like with more clarity of once you bring this stuff together, it's crazy, and there's so much you can do for good design. Like it doesn't matter what your actual, do you want to make heaps of money? Do you want to do great design? Whatever your kind of motive is, bringing the things together allows you to do that thing.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of where and it's kind of like BIM interoperability. It's like, I've got this file, I need to get it into Revit, and then I need to put it into Lumion or whatever. It's the same kind of thing, except it's just zoomed out. And the difference, I think, is that the mental paradigms that people have are not always commensurate in that way. Like Lumion and Revit and ArchiCAD and whatever, Rhino, they're all describing geometry, building geometry of some way. Whereas a financial analyst and a urban planning policy person and an architect and a retail specialist, they may actually have a different mental model about what the building and the development is. Like it may be a cash flow to someone, a building to someone, a piece of, OpEx, like maintenance problem to someone else. And if you can stitch those, so it's like an interoperability problem overlaid with a paradigm split, so you've got to somehow bring paradigms together and do the data interop at the same time. So again, you can imagine we're 2 years into this. We're talking this kind of language, which is very mathematical. You're abstracting it. The market's not understanding what we're talking about at all.
I mean, this concept of zooming out, right, is really, really important, because what you're talking about as an architect potentially having a seat at that table
100%.
right? So that they can be part of actually having a chance at changing the world. Because I think if you really were to just generalize and put this across, it's like really hard to do that with one project.
You
Right?
can't do it with one project. It's
And
possible.
for your example of you've got to do it 20 times to work your way up the policy ladder to actually get the code to change to do that thing, you actually have to zoom out and be at that level
Yeah.
of where all of that is being taken into consideration. And
Yeah.
so what you're talking about Giraffe doing, right, is integrating, becoming the common glue
Yeah.
between, or the potential to become the glue at that level so that like really amazing things can happen, right? Like
That's the
it's
point.
a facilitator. Yeah.
And that's exactly 100% right. That's so well put. And we're sort of urgent about it because we see it's having such an impact. And also it's not done at the moment. As in, if you go into an architectural office and you say, show me your projects, they will show you the P drive. Or worse, they'll show you their website with these like 25 megabyte images. And you're like, no, just on a map. So you can't go to a policymaker and say, hey, I've done 45 multifamilies in this corridor, and I'm going to show you that the average area is this. And if we did this, because that's the kind of evidence language that a policymaker would say, oh, I'll do the code change for you now, which is kind of impossible. The tooling just doesn't allow it. And so the tragedy unfolds because it takes 15 years to change that code. And there's 15 years of potentially compromised buildings. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying every code is terrible. I'm just saying when there's things that, and so, so it's an urgent, and we spotted this void. And it's such a weird void because it's so complicated. That's where we're sort of building software into that void. And what we found, so now we've done this big journey. We've spoken to the capital deployers. People want an architect at the table, as in everyone really recognizes the value of design, and they don't want to carry design risk. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why they want, and it's almost like a structural reason not to have one because it's slow to procure and And so if we could get this common glue, we can actually integrate. And so some of our developer clients now, especially the ones who are operating at scale, are saying to their consultants, do it in Giraffe. And the reason you got to do it in Giraffe is because I've configured Giraffe, my finance team, my investment committee, my spatial data team, my enterprise data team are in Giraffe. And so if you draw in Giraffe, all the data automatically flows to those guys. So my life is, as a corporate, is easier. I can now plug Tableau into it or Power BI, and I can see what's going on, right? If you will. And it's impossible if you send me PDFs or if you publish a drawing set, because then I have to ingest it and then it doesn't happen. But if you do this in this like big digital twin, then I can get your design in a format that it sits on the data structure and it works. And that to me is unbelievably exciting because it means that we're succeeding in our goal of kind of meshing these paradigms together in a true interop, deep interop. And that's where we are now. And so that's why we think now we can come back to the architects and say, actually, there is something valuable here. You're so overwhelmed by choice. There's all the old ones, SketchUp, Revit, there's the new ones, there's Arcol and Snapshot, and so this new gen, old gen, you got to choose. But I think we've got something here that is definitely worth considering.
And I would say it's, it sounds complex, but it's not that complex. There's like 3 fundamental tools you need if you want to be the translator between all these stakeholders, which is maps, drawing tools, and a calculator. Exactly what Rob described. And if you have those 3 things in one place, then you can be the Rubik's Cube or the, whatever the translator is between those elements, because I could log in as a numbers guy and I could just see the numbers, or I could log in as a drawing guy and I could just focus on drawing, or I could log in as a policy person and just look at maps and do spatial analysis. And we haven't even touched on it. But when those 3 things come together, that's the magic, the maps, the pencil, and the calculator. That was my byline for describing what is Giraffe for so long. It's map, pencil, calculator. And then that's the opportunity, I think, is this each one of those tools. And what I think Rob's about to get to is, I think our drawing tools are actually good now.
They're actually good.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Holy moly. But to get Control Z done, do you know what I mean? It's just implementing a good drawing tool. This is where like Rhino is still probably like my gold star of software in terms of just how, point to line to surface to solid, like it's just such a beautiful thing. But to get like, I don't know how many person years of development on Rhino, but it would be probably a couple of millennium. So you need to spend years and years and years to get something good. And so it's taken us years and years.
But that's what architects will demand, right? And so it's interesting.
They should, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, the tools have to be something. I say, especially in the new class of tools, it's got to be something you want to use, because we all use stuff we don't want to use, and we don't want any more of that, right?
Yeah. So 100%.
And I think it's really interesting to kind of think about James with these kind of three different buckets, and how interconnected they actually are, and how when you are making changes and observations in one and tweaking the drawing and seeing all that stuff update, like that's super powerful and informative and part of the decision-making process. And the more disconnected that is, like the slower it goes. And the thing I keep thinking of as you guys are describing what's going on here is like there's that old saying, like, work smarter, not harder. And architects are like we do hard work. That's what we do. So we'll just work harder, right? And we're not allergic to hard work. Like that's literally what the job requires. And so it is so hard to say, what do you mean, like, look over here at this new thing coming, because I'm so busy doing this thing right here. And so you really have to create basically a world-class product,
Exactly.
to even get them to look at it, because I mean, I'm sure you have stories upon stories about that.
No, and we do, and I think it's fair. As in, why would you, if you're doing a high risk job, you're personally liable. You've got to, why would you chance it on something that didn't feel good?
It's totally reasonable.
I wouldn't. So, and the offerings are good and they're cheap. As in Rhino, like it's like unbelievable. You pay $1,000, whatever it is, and you get it for 8 years. It's like it's so good and so cheap. And I think the thing that we've been trying to push, as in the message we're trying to get, is it's almost, you're not talking to Giraffe for the drawing tool. Like it's kind of table stakes now. Everyone's doing it, where you everyone started doing feasibility tools. I don't know why. So like you draw a colored box, you see the area. Great. Right? It's good. It was missing. So it's good that it's being done. But the collaboration now, everyone's doing collaboration. Everyone can see your cursors, right? Yeah. The true thing that you're wanting to try and get to is like technological empathy with what your client needs. And I think that is, it's a problem, as in it's difficult, knotty education piece. It's uncomfortable for an architect, but I think it's the right discomfort, as in if you're not doing that, if you're not saying, okay, hang on, let me just take some time, look at my deliverable, look at what my client's problem set is, and actually design a way of working around this reality, right? Then you do a disservice to yourself, because the reality is here. And I would say, I see that a lot, because it's just, I think it's so new. So I would say there's a couple of layers that Giraffe has. So drawing calculator maps does that, but there's two more layers which are critical. The first is it's actually on the internet, and it's properly like ontologically on the internet. There's a lot of things which it's like, it's a desktop tool on the internet, as in you open it in Chrome, right? But Giraffe is a database and APIs. That's all it is, as in it's Postgres with Django and JavaScript. And that's exposed to the user. So if you want to use the SDK or iframe in some React, or do something that's internet-y, and when I say internet, it's first principles, like you can make HTTP requests and you can do all this stuff, and that kind of clarity of this is just an internet tool, it's just polygons on a map using internet technology on a database, that is up and down the tool. So it's very, what would I say?
Well,
go.
This
James.
first principles thing used to drive me insane, because I'm like a front-end sales guy, and I would be talking to clients and be like, what we need is this one thing. We need a button that does X, or we need a tool that does financial feasibility. I'm like, okay, great. So I go to the development team, we need a financial tool, feasibility tool. And what our team would do is saying, what we should do is build a tool that builds a financial feasibility tool.
Yes.
And my brain would explode, because I'd be like, oh my God, now I have to sell services to the client to configure it. But it was actually the true genius of Giraffe. And every time I struggle with it, I know that it's actually for the benefit of the company long term and for the clients, because what is true about real estate that's different to banks, it's different to telcos, is that it is a very unique problem set for every client that we talk to. The way you design in Orlando, Florida, is so different to how you design in Sydney. Just a different set of problems. And so the way they underwrite deals in Orlando is different to how they underwrite them in Sydney. So if you want to build a platform that speaks to all of the users and truly stitches them together, then you can't just build the financial model that I wanted to build. You have to build the first principles tool. And that goes all the way down to the technology stack, which is what Rob's saying, which is actually, if you really wanted to, you could just build your own software on Giraffe.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the SDK is exposed. And I think, I would often say to Rob, like, hey, can we do this? And he's like, yeah, you do this. You pop open the JSON and you change it here. And, again, my brain would explode because I'm like, how am I supposed to sell that to people? But the true thing about architects and why I think architects love our software is because they love the way that works. They are first principles thinkers.
Yes.
And when you put that thinking inside of a developer, you get some real power. And what Rob's saying, I think to circle this all back to the story that we were telling a few minutes ago, is clients are seeing the value of that level of thinking and the value of design in that kind of first principles workflow when they have a design thinker in the room. And it's pretty cool. So then you can go and build a unique tool that does the pro forma, or it does the floor plan, or it does whatever the specific job is, but it's elevating it up to the right level of zoom, if you will, to the business problem that the developer needs to solve. So it's really cool. I think it brings it back full circle to where the storytelling is the actual issue again. Exactly. And the architect can build the unique tool for the unique job that needs to get solved.
So like a concrete example, because this is pretty abstracted, because it's there, it's so open, it's like inside out software, you can see how it works. A way it often pays out for us is because we're API first, we can connect to spatial data. So you can go to basically any city in the world. You can go to London, and within 20 minutes, because you're on the internet and their data's on the internet, you just pull their data in an open format. And anyone could do that if you're building a website. It's not like we're wrapping it and making it closed source. It's literally just connect to the internet. They're serving it via API, read it. And so you can land in London and you can have climate risk zoning, protected view corridors, buses, census data, as in deep. Imagine a context site analysis for an architect. You can have so much site analysis that's going to inform your design, that's going to help your thinking and deepen and enrich your response to the client. You can just get that. And you can get that through the technology. You don't have to copy paste the PDFs or do any of that stuff. And that's only possible in every city in the world because Giraffe takes the internet seriously. And so you're just navigating terabytes and terabytes of data seamlessly because that's what the internet's designed to do. And so as soon as you sort of say, okay, well, let's really treat this internet thing seriously and actually jack into the mainframe, like Neo, then it's boom. And I don't think people are ontologically, they're doing that in different ways, but there's still a gap there because and it's very, very exciting. So that's the first layer on top of those, map, calculator, box on the internet.
Can I just plug in here for a second? Because I think what a lot of people have experienced, myself included, and now this information's a few years old at this point for me, but it's a lot of people have built what you're talking about for really specific sites.
Correct. Yes.
And all of those scripts are broken now, right? It's over and over and over again is basically how that happens in firms. And obviously there's people who are way more advanced and maybe they have the staff who can keep that stuff running. And we're seeing more and more tools come out with some of the things you're talking about, maybe not all of them. Feature sets are changing all the time.
Feature, exactly. Yeah.
But this idea of using a tool that, I'm sure you kind of took a little bit of inspiration from the Rhino team and just making it available 100%. To build tools inside your tool, right? Yeah. But number one, you don't have to build tools. And a lot of people, they just don't have the staff for that. They can't retain the staff for that. They don't even know where to find the staff for that. And so there's a lot of problematics. Is that a word?
Yes.
Around that.
Definitely.
Around
That's
that
an
concept.
Word. Yeah.
Yes. So this idea of making a tool that gives people that power that they don't have to maintain is a big deal. And like you say, they can just go anywhere in the world because one of the guiding principle is location, right? Because
100%.
all buildings are put into
On
a
planet Earth.
location.
They are.
Yeah, so
It's weird.
So it's like just really, again, kind of going back to your idea of abstracting this and like distilling, let's call it that,
Yes.
distilling
Yes.
it down to this fundamental level. I mean, that sounds like too good to be true, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, it's real, Evan. Trust me. No, it's okay. I think to that, like, people want to build tools. This is the other big reason I started Giraffe as opposed to using Rhino. Like, Rhino is basically like 9.9 out of 10. Like, Grasshopper is so good. If you don't like Grasshopper, you can do Python. If you don't like that, you can do C#. It's solid as heck. It's like robust. It's cheap. Like, what's wrong with it? It's not on the internet. It's basically your only problem. And something that is critical to the internet is distribution. Like, distribution is out of the box of the internet is essentially distribution. It's this distributed network. And it was designed so that as the nukes take out this line and that line and that line, that the distribution of data will still find a way through the network to where it needs to be. It was literally designed to withstand nuclear attack. So it's so robust in terms of distribution.
Redundant,
And it's like, let's use that. That sounds like a good idea. Why change it? So Giraffe is around the distribution of this knowledge. So I can write a script. Something that's different between like Rhino and Giraffe is the scripts actually sit on the geometries. So rather than in a document, you sit on the geometry. Because in Giraffe, you don't actually have a document. You have every single geometry you've ever drawn on a database. And we just say, for those projects, we'll get that project geometry. But at any point, you can say, hey, that other geometry, just let me. So it's a completely different paradigm around what the data is. And the script sits on the geometry. So I can just copy paste geometries into my project. That comes with the script. And then that script then runs and executes on those geometries. And this solves the distribution problem. Because if someone says, hey, I need to do an apartment, like, didn't you have a core script? Or like, didn't you have a script that angled the windows to the view? It's like, yep, copy paste that in. And it comes. And then the way we've done it is the script is hidden until you open it. Like Steve Jobs, like with the Mac OS is the gold standard on this, where it's like, it looks super simple, but there's always like deeper shortcuts. Like if you're a power user, you can go in. Same with Giraffe. We want it to be like one big button, but then if you want to, you double click and then you double click twice, and then you're actually editing the JSON, like you're in code land. And so we've been working on solving this distribution thing, which is basically, how do you get the computational designer out of their bubble? Because the problem now is they do the work, and then because they can't distribute it, there's no distribution. They have to, they build the tool and then they do the work. And so they turn from a tool maker to like a trench digger. They've like designed the spade and now they've got to dig the hole. And that was like probably the thing that killed me at work when I was an architect, was like, I'd done all this work building these scripts, but then I had to run them. So people would come to me and say like, hey, can you just quickly do this master plan and tell me what the areas are? And I'm like, can't you? And they're like, no, we've tried. And I would train them and they would forget and blah, 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 blah. And so then I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I think that's a universal problem. And I think that's distribution. So I have this code, I have this logic, I have this IP, this insight, this design thinking, and I want to get it into your hands in a way that's robust to a nuclear attack and that's going to work when you need it in front of your client. That's what we've done. I actually think we've done. The reason I know we've done this is because we have people building scripts and distributing them that are not experts, and they're doing it in anger. And look, every now and then there's a bug, someone gets really upset, but no more or less than like Excel, because it's complex. But they are people using scripts that we wrote that I would never have imagined would be technically proficient enough to use those scripts, but they're there in the client base.
Cool.
And they love it.
How
and
satisfying.
It's crazy. It's so satisfying. Oh my goodness, it's satisfying.
You totally missed your opportunity here, though. I mean, surviving nuclear attacks, a giraffe is not going to do that. I mean, this is obviously a roach.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Our marketing people made us change.
I get it. It's not as, it's the aesthetics. There may be some, some
cockroach.
The reaction to
it's good. It's good.
It's interesting to think about how kind of trapped architects feel with their tools versus kind of, again, the new the new version of tools that are coming out and what's possible. And it was possible because you built it from scratch, right? Like, and you lived through the things that you're solving. And you're continually evolving by talking to people, getting feedback, and watching the tools they're building. And I mean, to me, that just seems like that. To me, that's a real message here. Is you don't have to be trapped in the tools.
And
that
I
you're
would
using.
say, it's like it's urgent, as in I think an imperative, as in if you're not thinking about your software tools. And let me just tell you this: there's this thing very influential with me called the infernal bicycle or the satanic bicycle. Have you heard this? This is a UI concept.
I don't think so.
Okay, so the bicycle, the gearing system, there's the front and the rear and the number of teeth, right? That is how much power goes from the pedal. And you need to understand that. When you do, easy. You just change the front and the rear gears. You go down in the snow, uphill, downhill. Imagine someone designed a bicycle where they hid the gears and then they had gravel mode, uphill mode, downhill mode, snow mode, right? Which is what modern cars do. You know, like in my Mitsubishi, it's like I'm in tarmac mode. And I'm like, what is tarmac mode? And, you know, it's just, well, it's like 50% of the power goes to the rear and 50 to the front. Or it's something simple, but they don't tell you what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the infernal bicycle, because it would be impossible to learn that, because now I want to go gravel uphill, but there's only like 2 modes. Like, which do I choose? So the user needs to see, you should trust the user that they are going to learn how the tool works, right? And they're going to figure out how gearing works on a bicycle and use it. And when they do, they're free. And until they do, they're kind of like actually underserved, like if you've got the modes. And that's why it's the satanic or the infernal bicycle, whatever it's called, right? And it's a UI concept. You want to expose the workings of the tool to the user. And as a designer, as an architect, you want the workings of your tool exposed to you, because in this age, with the AI where it is, where the internet, the data infrastructure where it is, if you're not making the tool, like taking ownership of your software and using it to define and build and create, I feel like the world is moving very rapidly past you, because that's just so fundamental and important. You know, it's like an electrician not having, imagine an electrician just had a big machine that he put over things. He didn't know what it did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's clearly, you know, you need to be very first principle. And so that's where we talk and have a belief that there's always a space for that there's always people that are ingenious and want to think from first principles and want to build their own stuff and like love it. And Giraffe is basically a tool for that kind of a user. And then it's very humble, because it's just polygons on a map on a database. If you understand that, you understand Giraffe. You know what I mean?
Nice.
And so it's very aligning.
This concept of like trusting your users are going to learn how to use the tool, and then there's kind of this, you know, different steepnesses to different learning curves. Can you just talk about kind of the steepness of your learning curve for this? Because I assume there's probably different levels of approach that you could come in and use a tool like this, but like, because that's one of the kickbacks, right? That's one of the this is where I have an issue with software. It's like, oh my God, I can see how long it's going to take me to become, even, let's just call it proficient, not a master, not a power user, just proficient enough to use this on a day-to-day basis. Like, that's just another objection that you'll hear all the time, because there's so much like
Totally.
sunk cost in the existing software. But we have all seen examples on our phones, especially, right, where it's like, oh, you already know how to use it. You just downloaded it. You already know how to use it, because the paradigms are different in modern tooling than they are in tooling that's been around forever.
I got 2 stories on that. And James, I'd like you to sell the one about you building an app for the client, the site search, reverse site search, but I'll tell first. So first, Giraffe, it's just polygon editor on a map. So you just draw a polygon and then you tell Giraffe, hey, this has 3 levels and you should classify it as classroom. All Giraffe is doing is calculating those areas and then allowing you to do Excel with them. So if you know how to use anything, Adobe or Revit or any drafting package, Giraffe is like, it's just a drafting package. And if you know how to use Excel, it's just Excel. So at the most basic level, it's a very familiar thing. And it's on a map, but it looks like Google Map, it's Mapbox, you know, everyone, you know. Mm-hmm. So it is under the hood though, it goes, you can go further, but you may not need to. Like if you're a developer, you could be very happy just doing shapes on a map. If you're a design director, you could be telling narrative with the shapes on the map. We've got lots of hotkeys, lots of speed, lots of lots of ways of manipulating the information so it works in a meeting, like at that speed, but it's just shapes on a map. And then it does everything automatically. The fact that it makes a portfolio of your data, of all your projects, the fact that it, you can access any geometry, that's all that we do, as in the database is just architected to do that. So it's easy on that level, but then it goes very deep. And this is where the thing that's really exciting to me is this story that James will tell you, where a non-expert user, as in not a professional coder or computational designer, then can take that very basic shapes on a map and do something magic with it, mainly using the LLMs to write code. Because this is the other thing. You used to have to do Grasshopper to tell Rhino what to do. Now you can go to ChatGPT and say, hey, write me a function that takes this square and puts a window on the 3 shortest and a door on the longest side. And ChatGPT will one-shot that thing done. And you copy-paste that into Giraffe and that code is executed and it'll work. It's crazy. And that is unlocking, it's a whole new world.
Definitely. And, before I tell that story, the rectangles on a map thing is actually profound in that the first learning hurdle is how do you draw a rectangle on the map? But that fundamental concept, I think, is the most valuable part of our product in that there's infinite context. You can come to the map at any scale and draw a rectangle and understand immediately the areas, start moving them around. And it is amazing what that does for your brain. And it actually changes the way you think about space. So anytime I have even a question about my house, the first place I go is Giraffe, and I draw a rectangle. Start moving it around. What's the setback on the rear fence? Can I fit an ADU? I go straight to Giraffe. I can see the boundary. I draw the rectangle. City of Orlando's 10 foot. If you have an ADU, no, I can't. Move on. Right? It's so
Raise
simple.
hell.
It's like a really complex
Super valuable
question.
right there.
Yeah.
I know it's still a valuable answer. Yeah.
Yeah. All I did was draw, a 5 foot by 5 foot rectangle, problem solved.
Yeah.
And and I've heard one of our clients describe, HKS are a client of ours in the cities and communities team, and they describe it as a thinking tool. And I just think that is the best way to describe what Giraffe actually is. It's a way of thinking spatially with infinite context, and it's addictive. Like once you start thinking about it, you're like, ooh, maybe I'll do this problem or that problem. And the problem that a different client, a developer client, came to me with was, we make available the problem Rob's describing of go to any city in the world and connect to its data is truly cool. And then the market is doing this job of consolidating all that data. With AI is helping these companies spin up and build these data sets of governed data, parcel data probably being the fundamental, asset class that we're all thinking about here. Regrid in the US have an API, a database of every parcel in the United States. Now it's most of Canada as well, along with all of its zoning information, and it's incredible. And they're building that data set as a service, which we then provide to our users as a optional extra if they want. And the client needs to be able to search that data set more than just look at it. And so I was like, okay, well, Regrid have an API. It's a really well documented API. Giraffe has an SDK. It's a really well documented SDK. I don't have time to wait for the development team to build this feature. I'm going to see if I can build it. And so I jump into ChatGPT and I dump the docs in there and I say, teach me how to write this thing. So, I download Visual Studio Code. I download the GitHub repository of Giraffe. 2 hours later, I built it and it is unbelievable. It works,
Wow.
Where you can, and it starts that
I
also.
thought you were going to
gets
say
you well
2
spent.
weeks. I thought you were going to say 2 weeks,
no,
2
it's 2
days.
hours.
I don't
It's
know.
crazy.
I built it in 2 hours.
And then
was
it's distributed. And once it's built, because it's on the internet, you literally just
I can just
permission it
publish
to
it.
your user. There they get it. It's like they don't need to download an exe and then update whatever it is. It's just boom, there it is. It's so when that happened, I was like, oh whoa, this is crazy.
If James can do it.
If Jack, literally though,
for real.
That's so cool.
And I think that's the thing that gets me super excited is most software is built to be the form, for that problem. Like building that form took me 2 hours to build a form that's like, I want to search flora in a form, multifamily parcels greater than 10 acres. It's 3 inputs. And it took me 2 hours to write that form. The purpose of the software used to be to build that form. But if you can build the form in 2 hours or quicker, if you know what you do. Now I know what I'm doing. I can build those in 10 minutes. And then the software actually needs to be the thing behind the form. And that's what Giraffe has always been. And it's been difficult to explain to people.
It's Yeah.
It's the underlying problem, which is I need to be able to take bespoke logic and stick it on a map so I can actually understand what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Giraffe built that in 2018, and we've been building these little modules ourselves at the same time, building this layer of what the AI guys are calling MPCs or whatever they are, MCPs, model context protocols. Basically, if you write a JavaScript SDK, you've pretty much written an MCP because you're exposing to the internet the logic of what your app is doing. And then the LLM can go read it and build code on your, working code on your application.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It's super cool.
Yeah.
We're building like bespoke little stuff for clients all the time now, and it's super addictive.
Nice. Well, I feel like we've told a pretty compelling story, but I think we need kind of a call to action here at the end. And I've been thinking of two things as we've been talking. Number one is like people have to go check out Giraffe. And I know you're really focused on architects right now. You started somewhere else because you kind of had to, right? But you've made it back to architects.
We've made it back.
I feel like that's not an uncommon story in today's day and age with new tools. I mean, it's like because of the things that I kind of outlined earlier. It's like, what do you mean another tool? Like there's no room for another tool. And maybe it isn't another tool in this case. Maybe it's replacing tools, right? And so it might be another tool for a short time, but I think it does start to replace tools. But the second call to action here, and I know that's kind of a weird marketing, maybe architects are a little bit allergic to that, but it's like you need to support this idea. Yeah, audience members, you need to go and check it out, but also understand the passion for our profession that is being put out there as a true, useful, valuable. If you can't tell through this conversation, Rob and team deeply care about this. And these are the tools for the current and next generations that are that are part of this profession. And because I don't want to say coming in, I want to, it isn't for the next generations. This solves real problems right now. And yeah, this is going to be the kind of tool that the next generations use. They will not use the same tools we do for good reasons, right? Because of the kinds of things that are possible nowadays. So really my hope by having this conversation is, number one, that you will go check out Giraffe, but that you will also have this kind of appreciation of what's happening in this space and how amazing it actually is to be on the receiving end of this. It's not a free product, but think of the value that it actually delivers and how quickly it delivers that value. And then you start to understand how this could actually replace so that you can work smarter instead of harder. So we will have links in the show notes for where to go to check it out. Please share this episode with people who you feel like need to hear this from a conceptual level, but also from a tool use level. And I want to give Rob and James the opportunity to tell you where to go visit if you're driving right now and you don't have time to stop and click on a link, right? But tell us where people can go to find out more about Giraffe.
So our website's best, which is giraffe.build, BUILD. And then we're very active on LinkedIn. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm posting GIFs most days of the week.
Yes, you are. And they're beautiful. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Giraffe it can do that too. It can do that. And it just kind of shows, you do it so simply and they're short, right? They short little things, but it's like, oh wow. That
fun.
looks pretty incredible.
It's creative. Yeah. Yeah.
And it is polygons on a map, right? Like that's what
don't
it
tell
really
anyone.
backs up the story. Too late. I think that's the title of this episode.
Yeah.
It's just
a great title
on a map.
Definitely.
All right, guys. Well, James, any final thoughts that you wanna share before we jump off this call?
Do we want to share our pricing strategy, Rob, and what we're thinking about in terms of
we can put that on. So
stack?
Yeah. So we're selling at $3,000 per year per user for the developers that are mainly leveraging the enterprise, as in the value there is sitting when you have many users doing an enterprise thing, whereas architects are much more individual, as in the designer is bringing themselves, and that pricing doesn't make sense. So we are introducing a Giraffe like a core tier, which is $45 a month. And it's month by month by month.
That just sounds kind of crazy low, right? I think you said before, if you're an architect, $45 a month is probably less than your coffee budget, right?
Oh, true. I mean, yeah, it depends how much coffee you drink, but yeah, I think it's like 20 minutes of billable time.
There you go.
And
That's a great
I think it's fair because Giraffe is a vessel, but like we've been saying, a lot of the value is it's like a piano. You need a player, as in it's a good piano, but you need someone to make music with it. And so it's not doing your job for you, right? It's like a hammer. So it's got to be high quality. You pay for it. It works. But most of the skill resides with the user.
Totally.
Yeah.
And $45 for polygons on a map. Yeah, that makes sense.
Polygons are ultimately polygons, and we can't charge much more than 45 a month.
This is well put, though, because, like you say, architects have so much software already and so much operating costs just to keep that software. Mm-hmm. And a lot of vendors look at how can we charge more? And with the whole time we've been going, how can we charge less? How can we charge less? How can we charge less? And I think we're finally there where we can do it. And so it's super exciting where not only is the tool, the most sophisticated and competent it's ever been for designers, but it is now the cheapest it's ever been. And so we're really excited. And you're the first person we're telling about that. So yeah, obviously our enterprise clients will have a different set of features that are specific to their enterprise need, but the designer doesn't need all that stuff. The designer needs the things we've talked about on this call, and all of the good stuff is exposed at that price. Being able to draw polygons in a map, being able to do generative workflows, being able to build your own calculations, being able to write apps and dump LLM code into the browser, that's all at that tier. So I'm super excited about it. I think it's the right way for a vendor to be going in 2025 is dropping prices, not increasing prices, as technology is basically getting commoditized. And the hero of the story is the architect. And I think the value ratio is correct.
I mean, you saved that till the end, James, but that's a pretty cool kind of concept that the hero is the architect here. And I think what you're bringing to the market let's just say it, like a lot of people are hearing about this for the first time, right? Or maybe they've seen glimpses of Rob's gifts on LinkedIn before. And it's like, oh yeah, Giraffe. Just seriously take a step back and just say, this is a really featured tool set for an affordable price to get some serious work done. I mean, to me, that's kind of what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a toy. We're not talking about a nascent tool. Nascent?
Yeah.
We're not, this thing is, you've been working on this. It comes from this pedigree of what you talked about, like a 9.9 out of 10 kind of a tool. That's where this is being fed from, and the passion and the overlay of experience in the profession, and going and working with developers and enterprises at really large scales to make really impactful decisions in urban planning and space making and place making and all these things, and then coming back to the architect after have learning all that and just saying, here's a tool that you can use today. Like it's going to take very little time for you to get up and running. That's a huge deal. So kudos to you guys for doing this, and thank you for coming on the show to tell everybody about it.
Thanks for having us. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to our members this week. Find out how you can become a member at trxl.co, and I'll talk to you again next week.